and welcome to another edition of Global Positioning. With me today is Dennis Nelson, the President and CEO of Project WET Foundation. He's come here to Helena from Bozeman, and we're thankful for that, making that short trip, beautiful trip. Dennis, I'm presuming that although Project WET and Project WET Foundation is known all over the world because you operate in so many places, I'm suspecting not a lot of us here in Montana are familiar with the project. So before we get into your story, let's talk a little bit about the work you do and how you got started.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's great to be here. Project WET, the word WET actually is Water Education for Teachers. And we use teachers in the broadest possible context. Everyone's a teacher. And because water is important to all of us, our program through the years, which has deep roots in Montana, focusing on some of the water issues that we have, it really has developed based on our ability to write water science methods. And these methods are the types of things that teachers use to teach young people. And, you know, in the beginning of our work, it was really kind of an experiment on, you know, how do we reach these children with topics like groundwater and watersheds and wetlands and even more complicated things like water law. Yeah. And so we recognized that our method of writing these science activities was a way to not only reach children but to engage with water managers of all sorts. And this could be corporate, could be community, non-government organizations. But our mission is to reach children, parents, schools, and communities of the world with water. But we also, when we started, we weren't looking at the world. We were really looking at, you know, our home state, Montana.
Yeah. Well, backing up just even further, you started this. You know, you're the godfather as well as the CEO. It started in North Dakota, our neighboring state, and you know, for a lot of reasons, Montanans are now having to pay due respect to North Dakota, more so than in the past, for all of the energy that's being developed there and the things we have in common. There's not as many jokes going back and forth across our common border. But you migrated the idea or the project from North Dakota to Montana State University in Bozeman. What prompted that maneuver?
Well, at the North Dakota State Water Commission, they were dealing with all sorts of water issues, both on the quantity side and the quality side. And North Dakota, like Montana, having, you know, one of the major rivers of the United States, North America, the Missouri flowing through it, they were dealing with upstream water issues. They were dealing with downstream water issues. They were dealing with groundwater conflict, wetland discussions. And I was really brought in to try to take some of these complex topics and try to make them understandable to, you know, the lay person. Yeah. And in that process, you know, I was assigned to work on a teacher education program, developing, you know, a very science-based education program. And that's kind of the origins of Project WET in our neighbor state, North Dakota, at the North Dakota State Water Commission. When I was there, we had a great deal of success in kind of reaching teachers, and the teachers were interested in water. You know, it was all over the curriculum. You know, the water issues were in the media. The elected officials were struggling with them all the time, and we wanted, again, rather than having kind of an advocacy discussion about water issues, which wouldn't have been appropriate for children, we wanted to have a science-based program that would really tell you, how do you teach a young person about groundwater? Yeah. How do you teach a young person about watersheds? So in that process, we developed a water history program called Liquid Treasure, talking about, you know, how do you know where you're at today unless you know where you were in the past? And how do you know where you're going in the future unless you understand, again, today? So a water history program, we developed a groundwater education program, and then we developed some science activities on water, again, for teachers to use with young people. And during that time, a couple professors at Montana State University had been working on a computer simulation of a watershed, and it was far ahead of its time. It was an electronic watershed in a box, where you actually had people managing water resources based on an electronic data set. And imagine, Steve, this was back in the early 90s and that time. So
It was pre-cell phone.
It was pre-cell phone, it was pre-everything electronic and digitized. And what they were looking for is a way to have an outreach program to go with it, and larger than this electronic unit. And it was about 1989 I was invited by Montana State University to move to Montana, and moved in 1989. 1990 was kind of a nucleus to get started, set up shop. I was in the Montana Water Resources Research Institute, which is, of course, is a university system group. And basically, as I look back on it, it was an incubator. Yeah. It was an incubator of an idea, almost, like you develop something special in your garage and you start going. Well, North Dakota was the garage, and Montana was the incubator that took that idea and provided an amazing home at Montana State University, which we went from a very, very small amount of funding, and due to kind of our connections that we were making, the support that Montana State was giving us, our linkage with the Montana Department of Natural Resource and Conservation, the state agency deeply involved again in issues like the Missouri River, right, and all other water rights and things. We were very fortunate to receive some major funding to Montana State University to take the concept and expand it throughout the United States. And it started with Montana, Idaho, and Arizona. Very quickly, the program again expanded a little bit, and we ended up publishing what is called the Project WET Curriculum and Activity Guide, which to this day is still the top of class in water science curriculum to teach about, again, major water topics.
At the K-12?
At the K-12 level.
Yeah.
And kind of through the process, not only were we creating and generating these original water education materials, we were setting up a network. And you didn't want it to be a book that was on the shelf. We wanted it to have its own life. Yeah. And so in every state, we have a Project WET coordinator. And this coordinator is either in an NGO, in a university, maybe in a state agency. And they use the Project WET materials and conduct workshops and events throughout their states. So that was all happening between about 1989 and through the 90s up to about 2005. But in Montana State University, we were real fortunate because of kind of these incremental steps that we were making in publishing new materials. We set up a publishing series called Discover a Watershed series that focused on major watersheds in North America. We had a program called Healthy Water, Healthy People that was funded by a private foundation that related water quality, environmental health to your health. Yeah. And these type of projects are very relevant to all people, but in particular, if you're teaching chemistry and you want to show how do you relate, the chemicals in water to your health, this would help a teacher teach that. And we had other series that we developed, again, kind of in this incubator phase at Montana State University that have been going from no publications in 1989 to today. We have about 35 education guides for teachers and about 50 little children's books called Kids Books, Kids in Discovery series, covering all different types of topics. Now,
and they're translated into multiple languages?
Not during the time we were at Montana State University, but it was kind of a realization that happened in the late 90s. We were invited by the Mexico National Water Commission and a group called the Mexico Institute for Water Technology to visit Mexico and talk to them about what was going on in this program called Project WET. And at the time, we had no dreams of global connections. We were still developing and testing and kind of building the network in the United States, which again, by about 2000, every state we were working with. And at that time, we probably were conducting about, somewhere around 3,000 community and school education workshops, reaching about 20 to 25,000 teachers through our network each year. So there was a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, and kind of like the tipping point, people were going, this is interesting, it's relevant to us because they're talking about the same issues,
Right.
except I'm in another part of the country. Well, Mexico was going, we could develop our own program, or we could develop a program that looks like it's very successful in our neighboring country. And Mexico and our neighbor to the north, Canada, became our first international partners. And the people that we work with are, mostly come out of the water resource management agencies in the government.
Yeah.
Or, they're the hard scientists, the engineers, the hydrologists, and so on. But they recognize that for people to make good decisions, they should make informed decisions. And that was kind of the beginning of our realization that, these methods, science methods, how you teach about a topic, although Montana and Helena has a whole different type of what we call a water address, if you take that same way of teaching about that water address to Argentina or to Japan or to China, the methods that we have developed, how you teach about that topic, worked in all these different countries. And it was like the light bulb went off. And we're
Did you
going,
use the word
it's
app?
working.
You've got the water app. In today's jargon, I mean, that's what it sounds like. You've developed an application that is universally applicable, even though the material circumstance, the economic circumstance, even the
Political,
social
everything.
circumstances will be different everywhere, but everybody needs water, everybody appreciates water, and everybody needs to know about it, et cetera. So it sounds like a fantastic migration. You moved upstream from North Dakota to Montana. You mentioned Montana State University as an incubator, and having just been there for other reasons, they're still treading that path. I mean, the university as a land-grant university has become an incubator in many arenas of science and technology. I'm just learning this. So it sounds like you might have been a pioneer, you and your organization were pioneers in that use of a university to be the place from which small things get large and get spread around for the betterment of society.
Yeah, and again, when I look back on the years at Montana State, and I think of working with the different vice presidents of research, and that's where our center was located.
Yeah.
I mean, they were risk takers, they were visionaries, they realized that we could have failed and been gone right away, but as we again had these little baby steps of success, they encouraged us all along. And I hadn't worked in a university before that time, and my experience there and the lessons learned from all dimensions were really the type that lasts for life. And again, as a major publisher, as we are today,
Yeah.
Working with the intellectual property attorneys, working with
Right.
the scientists to make sure that the content was right on, and having linkages with education, departments, made sure that the methods that we were using worked. But really, it was like again using the new language. It was like a cloud of support for a very much an infant education program, and we were at Montana State University from 1989 through 2005, and at that time, we We're receiving lots of attention from global agencies, global businesses, private funders, and again, from the financial perspective, we went from, again, in 1989, incredibly little. I can't even imagine, that small amount of money to, growing into a fairly significant budget with significant amounts of local activity in Bozeman and in Montana that caused us to, really take a look at, how did we want to develop beyond, the university, but still have a friendship and a relationship. So in 2005, after 16 years at Montana State University, we set up an independent foundation called the Project WET Foundation. Yeah. And about imagine at that time we went from one state in 1989, very few publications, to in 2005, a long list of great publications. We had a significant amount of revenue coming back from the sale of these publications, both in United States and abroad, and partners that we couldn't even imagine in the past now coming to us. Yeah. And so what we did is we set up an independent foundation in 2005, and really to kind of open up Project WET into new dimensions. And since 2005, it has been amazing what has happened with us as far as partnerships and connections with some of the largest corporations in the world, working with water sector leaders from United Nations agencies, again to governments and some of these corporations. And again, it all goes back to the roots of the program. And I have to give credit, North Dakota State University, our North Dakota Water Commission, yeah. Montana State University, Montana Department of Natural Resource and Conservation, for believing that this little seed concept had some potential. Yeah. But so that was an interesting transition, and right at this moment, as the Project WET Foundation looks into March, and it's the 6th World Water Forum, and it's going to be coordinated by a group called the World Water Council. We have been asked to lead 2 major sessions on water education of children and youth at this global event. Yeah,
in Marseille, France. Now, when people are seeing this program, this may be after the fact. They may be seeing this after you've been and done this. But knowing this now, people can connect what they may see as news about this World Water Forum overseas, make the connection to you and your program here. Just backing up for a minute, yourself, were you trained as an educator or a scientist or something else entirely? Because it sounds like you've had to combine kind of methodologies to come up with the application that does work, because it has to be kind of targeted at young minds, which think differently than mine these days. But you also have to have a really fine understanding of the nuances and the facts of science so that you get it straight. So where do you come from educationally?
My background, believe it or not, is in microbiology. Uh-huh. And I love science, love nature and the outdoors, and I had a real interest in kind of the health side of microbiology, which of course is the basis. And but I love the sciences, and spent a lot of time looking through microscopes in a very focused level, and I guess I would be a good example of someone that really transitioned from spending time looking in a microscope to running a global water education program. But and then I have other degrees in natural resource management, so I've always had kind of this science and natural resource interest. But I'll tell you a story about how people influence people. I had an uncle that was an educator, and he really was involved in kind of the political science and history and that area. And we eventually went to a workshop. And my uncle's name was Stan. And Stan, it was like we crossed. He wanted to go into science education, and I was going, wow, I was working on this water history project, learning about, kind of the origins of how technology changes, what we do. We used to haul water in buckets, and we used to not worry a lot about water quality.
Yeah.
And we really changed from those days to having some of the best water in the world here in Montana and in our cities. You don't think about water when you turn your faucet, because the Helena Water Department is taking care of business.
Right.
Okay, now, where I grew up, we had water problems, and both quantity and quality. And my uncle, again, brought me into this education arena. And it was, at the time, it was science education on, the outdoors. And I just loved it. I just loved it. And I went on into graduate school and again, studying natural resource, but I had this interest in, water, environment, and teaching. And my first job was in Brookings, South Dakota. And the job involved trying to connect people's knowledge that their water supply, and this was a groundwater system, could have an impact on health. And they were having, it was a major cancer study. And the only similar environmental condition in this particular area was the groundwater. So my task was to educate people of all ages about the relationship and the potential relationship of groundwater quality, your operations as a farmer or a community on the ground, and the consumption of that water and health. And that was a tough job, and I learned an awful lot. But it was kind of the basis for understanding that these young people who are also drinking the water and listening to this in the media about either health issues or the building of a multi-million-dollar water system to get people new water sources.
Yeah.
They had lots of questions, and so I came out of the science background, but my interest in education was really solidified, based on some of these real-life ground situations, trying to help people understand. But the part related to writing science methods came out at the North Dakota State Water Commission, and kind of again, this challenge to help people understand complicated water science and water management and protection in a way that made sense to you. And so our science methods are not lecture.
Yeah.
They are hands-on. I mean, you're going to get, maybe
get
you're in
wet?
the mud. You're going to get wet, and you're going to have fun.
Yeah.
And we have an activity, and it's kind of a different title, but it's called 8 for 1, 1 for all. And we have 8 major water users, and let's say mining and agriculture and nature, fish and recreation, hydropower, and all these different water users. And every water user has 4 needs. It doesn't matter if you're an elephant or an ant or you or me. You need the right amount at the right time, the right quantity at the right cost. Okay, so we set up, and then there's one. It's one water source. I mean, from the beginning of time to today, we still have the same water source.
Yeah.
But thanks to the hydrologic cycle, the water movement around the world and refreshing, we have water that we can use. But we have to manage it and protect it for all of us. So this activity allows us to actually have a fun game on teamwork, communications, and how do you work together to solve water issues. And you actually have to move water that is hooked to it's a can with strings to it with a rubber band around it, that you have to talk to me so that we go through these different challenges: a drought, a flood, endangered species, or water pollution. So we all get together and we move this can downstream, pass it to another community without dropping, because if you pull your string back, the rubber band will expand and the can falls.
Right.
Okay, so we use this now with corporations in sustainability training. We use it with people to talk about, again, how do you communicate, how do you cooperate, how do you try to work together to solve an issue or a problem or a challenge. So that's just one example. We have about 300 of these science methods covering all different types of topics. So that's a long way to get to how I'm interested, but I love writing science methods. That's the part when I get up in the morning, if I could do that, I'm excited, which is maybe a strange thing, but that excites me.
Yeah. Well, your story is remarkable, and I just want to, before I forget to mention it, we in Montana, we know we're a headwater state, and that means a lot of things to a lot of people, but we know it's a good thing to be. And there are headwaters areas of the world that are very critical to the future of the world, and we happen to be one of them. And you're in it, and you're spreading this message, this education all over the world, which is just remarkable, and I'm happy to hear about it. The other thing, I'm just curious, it might be irrelevant, but we're the only state that has a constitution that guarantees a clean and healthful environment. And I don't know if that has had any import in your evolution, the progress of your entity, or is it just there in the background as an institutional support that may not get even mentioned? As you're working around the world, that might be something else to export, is the notion that the law can guarantee this, and then you got to go working at it.
Stephen, let me tell you how it relates to me, and I can do this at a personal and a professional level. One is, I am thankful every time I hop off that airplane and that flight in Bozeman, Montana, and I take a drink of water, because we have, again, invested a huge amount into making sure that we have great quality waters. We have issues, everyone has issues, but in Bozeman, in Montana, in the United States, we've done huge things with science, technology, and implementation of the Clean Water Act.
Yeah.
Protecting wetlands.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you and just tell our viewers that we're winding down. We're going to be out of time here shortly. I want to thank Dennis Nelson from the Project Wet Foundation for being with us here in Helena, and let's continue your story. As we run out of time, we're going to keep talking.
Okay,
so
thank you.
The Clean Water Act and then some.
But we've done an amazing job, and we have great water resources. And if you travel to other parts of the world, and we're in 54 countries, you see things that are literally shocking when it comes to water and water quality.
Yeah.
And I often tell a story about